Hi everyone, I'm Evgeniya Blyznyuk. I'm a sociologist and analyst, and I'm the CEO and founder of Gradus Research, Ukrainian market company I started in 2019 that delivers fast, reliable insights through both qualitative and quantitative methods. Before launching Gradus, I spent over 15 years as a CMO in major media holdings and served as a head of analytics at the presidential administration of Ukraine from 2014 to 2017. Today, I want to talk about what it means to conduct research during the full-scale war. When society changes overnight, data becomes sensitive and insights can directly influence real-world decisions. I will share how our methods, ethics, and role as a researchers have evolved and what this experience can offer to the global research community. At first glance, everything seems obvious. In any crisis, research budgets are usually among the first to suffer. They are cut, postponed, or cancelled altogether. But the war showed a different picture. The war is not just a crisis like 2008. It is a mega crisis, ideal storm, unpredictable in scale. Social changes are tectonic. Consumer behavior shifts fast and deeply. Competition for shrinking audiences become extremely intense. As a result, many companies and brands decided to invest more in research because without insights, decisions become blind. All of us in Kiev woke up February 24, 2022 at 5 a.m. because of strange sounds. There were the sounds of explosions. Everyone reacted differently. Someone got into their cars and left Kiev. Some stayed at home, some went straight to the front, but all of us, without exception, found ourselves living in the reality of war. Gradus launched its first wartime survey on February 28, 2022, just 4 days after the full-scale invasion began. We had 3 clear reasons for doing this. First one, to support our team. Second one, to document social changes. And third one, to retain our research panel. The first reason was the team support. In the early days of the war, we were hiding in the shelters under heavy shelling. Kiev was almost encircled, and information was scarce. We needed something stable, something to hold on, and our professional work became that anchor. The second reason was the need to collect data quickly on social shifts unprecedented in scale. I strongly believe that documenting changes and making results public available is one of the key social missions of research company during the wartime. The third reason was to retain the panel. Today, Gradus is a full-cycle research agency conducting both qualitative and quantitative studies. At the start of full-scale invasion, our core business was rapid surveys conducted via our own smartphone panel and own app. The combination of panel ownership and technology allowed us to work with even the most complex samples quickly and with high quality. In the early days of the war, technology allowed us to follow our respondents. Gradus was already installed on their phones, so our main task was to stay in touch with them and keep them engaged. All these objectives were achieved. As I mentioned earlier, the war triggered tectonic changes in society. Population structure began to change dramatically across multiple dimensions. Demographically, this is driven by external and internal migration, rise in mortality, and dramatic decline in birth rates. Today, according to different estimations, Ukrainians' population in Ukraine is around 27 million people, compared to 37 million before the war. The estimations vary widely from 22 to 32 millions. According to the United Nations, more than 6 million Ukrainians are currently abroad under temporary protection. Internal migration is also massive. Officially, around 4 to 5 million internally displaced people are registered. In reality, many more have moved multiple times. There is also significant uncertainty around people living in temporary occupied territories and those who left through eastern borders, where no systematic registration exists. So we are not just dealing with a smaller population, we are dealing with a population whose structure is unstable, constantly changing, and very difficult to measure. The main drivers of population decline include people remaining in occupied territories, those who left through western borders and are officially registered, those who exited through eastern borders without registration, and increased mortality across different age groups. Once a year, we monitor sentiments of Ukrainians living in EU countries. The desire to return home tends to be emotional, while the decision to stay in host countries is driven by rational considerations. The increase of intentions to return to Ukraine that we observed in May 2025 was linked to the first attempts of diplomatic settlement of the war initiated by the administration of the new President Donald Trump. In moments of despair, people are tending to hope. Accordingly, the rise in return intentions reflected expectations of renewed momentum in the negotiation track. However, when it came to concrete timelines for returning home, respondents shifted back to a realist mindset, postponing this decision for the coming years. Social change is driven by the nature of war itself. It's deeply personal, highly dramatic, and very traumatic. New social groups emerge. People who lived under occupation, victims of the war crimes, internally displaced persons, children who lost parents, communities living near the front line, people who lost loved ones, veterans with severe injuries, and many others. These groups are fragmented and their experiences are highly specific. They require careful, sensitive, and detailed research. In times of crisis, willingness to participate in surveys usually declines. During the war, we observed several distinct response rate patterns. In the first months, response rates were extremely high. Our surveys focused on lived experiences, shelling, evacuation, border crossing, and displacement, not on everyday consumer topics. During this period, we cancelled all respondents' incentives. Still, people were eager to share what they are going through. National samples were completed within hours. In our second year of the war, willingness to participate started to decline. Apathy increased. Hopes for a quick end of the war faded. Fear of mobilization also played a role, especially when contact involved an interviewer. From the third year of the war, response rates stabilized around pre-war levels, at least for broad target groups. Response rates are highly context-dependent. After nights of heavy missile attacks, completion speed drops sharply. Surveys that usually take a few hours may take an entire day or longer. Power cuts also affected response rate, both because of slower mobile internet and higher stress levels among respondents. Sample design becomes extremely challenging when the actual population structure is unknown. Each research agency has to make its own methodological choices. Most studies rely on quota sampling, controlling for age, gender, region, and settlement size. Quotas are usually based on pre-war data, adjusted using official migration statistics, estimates of population in occupied territories, and internal population redistribution. Face-to-face research becomes much harder as people are far less open to physical interaction. Telephone interviews show lower response rate among men because of issues of mobilization. Online panels have proven effective for tracking social changes over time, but they require strict quality control and constant panel rotation. Longitudinal studies where the same respondents are surveyed repeatedly allow us to observe reactions as events unfold. Quantitative research requires especially careful questionnaire design, testing, and verification. Researchers themselves are part of the wartime context with their own experiences and biases, so questionnaires must be protected from personal projections. It is crucial to track long-term trends. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, we have been measuring the level of subjective stress among Ukrainians' population. This indicator is based on 10 questions capturing the presence of different stress symptoms. Ukraine has long been a country living in a state of ongoing crisis with consistently high stress level. Yet now, at the end of the fourth year of the war, this indicator has exceeded 91%. The second indicator concerns the language used in everyday communication. Ukraine is traditionally a bilingual country with most people fluent in both languages. However, since the beginning of the full-scale war, a clear trend has emerged toward a conscious shift to using Ukrainian exclusively, including within families. The shock of the invasion was so profound that people sought to emphasize their distinction from the aggressor state, and language became one of the ways to do so. Among younger age groups, this transition to Ukrainian is happening significantly faster. Long-term trends are also essential for understanding of consumer behavior. At the beginning of the full-scale war, the importance of brands in purchase decisions dropped significantly. People focused on physical availability, bringing distribution issues to the forefront. By 2025, we are already seeing a recovery in the importance of brands. Moreover, people are striving to return to their pre-war consumption habits, as these evoke memories of more peaceful times, provided, of course, that their income levels allow it, which for most Ukrainians have declined dramatically. Before the full-scale invasion, Ukrainians tended to favor foreign brands and imported products. However, since the start of the war, we have observed a surge in consumer patriotism. People began choosing products made by Ukrainian manufacturers, guided by more affordable prices and comparable quality. This wave continues to this day. At present, we see remarkably dynamic growth of Ukrainian producers across all FMCG categories, as consumers are quite literally voting for them with their wallets. The biggest difference in wartime qualitative research is sensitivity. Topics that feel neutral to some participants might be deeply painful to others. For example, when discussing children's food consumption for women, it is important to understand whether they have partners, whether those partners are at home or serving in the military forces, and whether they are veterans or fallen soldiers in the family. This helps moderators avoid re-traumatization. Some qualitative studies are specifically designed to explore wartime experiences, for example, in-depth interviews with internally displaced persons or people who lived under occupation. In these cases, it is essential to provide not only professional training to moderators, but also psychological support after the interviews. The emotional impact of these conversations can be very strong. Almost all qualitative research is now conducted online. War accelerates the digitalization of everyday life. I will cite a fragment from a qualitative study that we conducted before the war and repeated in 2025. Before the war, Ukrainians dreamed of their family's health and material well-being, with its indicators being a nice home and a large car. The dreams of 2025 are fundamentally different. people dream of family reunification, of living without constant anxiety and without generators, and of airports reopening. An open, peaceful sky traced with airplane contrails has become a symbol of victory and peace. The war forced us to integrate the do not harm principle directly into sample design and questionnaires. Excluding respondents from temporary occupied territories and active combat zones is an ethical decision, not just a technical limitation. At Gradus, we consciously exclude such respondents from quantitative studies to protect their safety and avoid potential harm. This reduces classical representativeness, but it aligns with ethical standards and the realities of the war. Researchers must also acknowledge that during wartime they are not external observers anymore. In Ukraine, researchers live in the same context they study. This increases sensitivity, but also requires constant reflection and internal peer review to avoid emotional bias. War is fought not only on the battlefield, but also in the informational space. Because of this, we approach data publication with extreme caution. Research findings can be taken out of context and used as a weapon. At the beginning of the war, we published survey results on business sentiment in Ukraine. Several figures were extracted by Russian propaganda and spread internationally as an evidence that Ukrainian business planned mass closure. This experience reinforced the need for careful, responsible communication of the data. War creates a perfect storm. The context changes instantly, driven by both predictable factors and completely unexpected events. Speed and accuracy become critical for timely decision-making. Periods of escalation occur frequently in wartime. I will give you one example. In February 2025, US President Donald Trump stated that support for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was only 4%. This claim was used to increase pressure for elections and echoed key Russian narratives. Within just 4 hours, the Gradus Express poll showed the statement was false. 23% of Ukrainians said they would vote for President Zelensky. This made it possible to show the international community the real situation. Having your own respondent panel is a major source of stability, especially during large-scale migration. One of the most powerful tools in wartime research is long-term comparison. In Ukraine, there is a unique study that has been conducted continuously since 1996. It allows us to track how people's perception of life has changed across almost the entire history of our independence. This is not a single snapshot. It is a long story of society through peace, crisis, revolutions, and war. What makes this comparison especially revealing is what we see at the start of the full-scale invasion. In the first months of the war, despite fear and shock, there was a clear emotional uplift. People reported a stronger sense of unity, meaning, and moral clarity. Many indicators temporarily moved in a more positive direction, driven by mobilization, solidarity, and a shared understanding of what truly matters. As the war became prolonged, the picture changed. By 2025, life in Ukraine is perceived as more sad and uneasy than at any other point in this timeline. Feelings of instability, fatigue, and insecurity dominate everyday experience. At the same time, on the moral dimension, society today is seen as more human and dignified than in the early years of independence. Taken together, this shows a society that is emotionally exhausted and physically unsafe, yet morally consolidated and strongly value-driven. This is exactly why long-term research matters during the war. Technology-driven data collection allows researchers to follow people as they move and change. Mapping sensitive topics before a crisis helps create a valuable baseline for comparison. Finally, measuring societal conditions even without a client request creates a knowledge bank, one that will later find its audience. Thank you for your attention, and hi from Kyiv.